we are getting the data, we're going to play around with in Excel. Let's start to actually come in and look at how data looks in Excel and talk about its format. So the data I've shared with you, we're really going to be working with these sort of two tables here. We're going to be working with this one that says iPads data, right, which we'll reopen in a second and talk about more in a more meaningful way, but where each row is going to represent a college, and the columns are going to represent a series of data points about them, anything from whether it's a historically black college or university, whether it's research based, what county it's from, total number of students, and total number that live in dorms, or rather total number that the dorms could hold. The one we pulled from Social Capital, it's got sort of an ID and name, and then sort of these three key metrics that they were talking about on the website: the connectedness, the percent amongst low income or below median income groups who are friends with higher income people, the sort of percent or the likelihood, for example, that if you do two of your friends at random, they would also be friends with each other, this clustering, and then this sort of volunteering, the percent that regularly engage in sort of a civic structure. Why I'm showing you them, though, is because that's not how they came to me. And you're going to notice these sort of two key file types that we're going to deal with frequently when you're working with data in Excel. And that's the main file type that Excel wants is an XLS, right? It's a sort of cleaned and formatted spreadsheet that Excel likes to process. But most of the data we download from the internet, or that I give you or that we get, is actually not going to be XLS. It's going to be CSV. These ones here, I'll show you in a second, is what the iPads data looked like when it came to me. And this is what sort of the social capital data look like. Now, the cool thing is you can double click on it and it'll likely open in Excel or open numbers or open Excel. If it does, the second thing I'm going to show you in a second, you'll know what's happening. It'll come up looking like a text document. You can always go to open with and choose one of those platforms to open it. So these things can open, CSVs, comma separated values. They can open in Excel and they look much the same, right? You have sort of a row and a column, but they're often scrunched together. There's no sort of coloring. There's no organization. It doesn't sort of save any of that formatting. And the other thing is that, interestingly, sometimes they'll have these, definitions at first up top that don't really make much sense to you. And this is sort of a key indicator I'm going to constantly remind you, is that when you get data, and we'll really inform this next week when we talk about gathering data in the real world, you always want to look at the place you got data from. And if you explore the download data section here enough in Social Capital, and you go down to the README, you can sort of open it up and find, what these variables mean. It'll tell you, okay, EC owned college, that's the definition of economic connectedness, right? So you always want to be looking for that metadata when you have new information. If I open the iPads, that's even crazier, right? I can open and see it has two files. And see, this one comes to me not with all those information I've seen before, right? Historically black colleges, control sector, Carnegie. Those all had text-based answers when I saw them last, but here they're coded. And I can actually see there's another table that came in with value labels that I could follow and see what they mean. So that control, when it's a 2, here is control and it's a 2, that means private, not-for-profit college, versus when it's a 1, it means it's a public school. So I actually had to prepare this ahead of time, using some of the skills I'm going to cover with you on these Excel videos here. And I'm bringing this up largely to say that this is going to be common, that when you get data from the web that's a CSV, a comma-separated value, this is what you're going to be working with. And that's because it's not actually something that was made for Excel, right? Excel was built to be able to read it. But if you were to right-click, for example, the social capital and do open with text edit, or notepad, that would give you a clear indication of how this data is actually structured, right? You can see that each name here, right? This is the college ID, and then a comma, Faulkner University, comma, this value, that value. So the concept that I'm saying here is that it literally is a comma separated value. It's almost like you're writing something in a notepad where the cells in Excel, right, these sort of values that you're used to looking at as columns and rows and such across and down, are actually being depicted as text-based values separated by a comma. So each new column you'd go to would be a comma in that workbook. So one thing to keep in mind, though, is the tendency I know is often just to be like, I'm lazy and tired, I'm just going to keep working in a CSV. And you're going to see at the end of this video that when we interface with Pro, it is often best to be doing it with a CSV. But when we're doing some of the interim steps, the cleaning, the analytics, the variable or the descriptive statistics in Excel, you don't really want to work with a CSV if you can help it, for reasons that I'll sort of show you right now. So for one, it doesn't really save anything, right? So I may, do some of these techniques I'll show you in a second, change the way something looks, make some columns bolded or stuff, highlight the data and information that I want to do, so on and so forth. But when you save it, remember that Excel is just reading what was behind the scenes, which is a notepad with values with commas in them. So none of that formatting is saved. That's cool, but it starts to get dangerous when you start maybe creating new tabs or doing things like a pivot table we'll show later. Again, we're going to cover this in a minute, how you sort of create these new workbooks down here. But let's say I create this new one. I'm going to have other pieces of data here. Field 1, Field 2, Field 3, Bob, Dave, Stella, and I don't know, Field 2 is cheese and also cheese and more cheese, and then 1, 2, 3 out of pure laziness. And I'm all happy about it. I got my demo one here. I got my sheet 1. Very good. I'm going to hit save. But CSVs, they're only going to save the live tab. Look at that. All of my data is gone, right? It still thinks it's called CSV demo, but because I was active, if you rewind in the video, you'll see that I had the one that had this data active. That's all that saved, so I would have lost everything. So the workaround to this is, my opinion, when you get data in a CSV, if you're going to play with it in Excel, if you're going to watch it and clean it and visualize it and then take it in to Tableau or then take it into Arc Pro or then take it into something else, come on up to Save As. And when you have your option, do File Format. And again, yours will look slightly different if you're on a Windows or if you're using Numbers or if you're using Open Excel or something like that. But just come on here and choose, save it as an Excel workbook or spreadsheet or whatever it is. And all you're doing there, and I can say Social Capital Excel. All you're doing there is ensuring that the stuff I do to it and edit, and if I create multiple tabs and all that jazz and that good stuff, blah, 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 blah. And come on in here, tabby 2. Blah, 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 writing stuff, and then I save it on this. If I've got it in sort of my Social Capital Excel, that's all fine. This is what Excel was built to do, to have multiple different tabs, to save formatting, as well as sort of the data. So again, that's an intro video to this idea of we're going to view it in Excel or Teams or Open Excel, but we're often going to get it as a CSV. And I just want you to know what that is. Again, we're going to have a nice symmetry to these videos. We'll close this video set here by going back to CSVs, right, to load the data into ArcGIS. But for now, you really want to make sure that when we're working in Excel, we're trying to save it as an XLS. So I'm going to stop this one, and we're going to pick back up with both the data sets. We'll talk through how it's structured, some basic formatting things and basic formulas. We'll do some sort of pivot table, and then we'll put it back to ArcGIS.